Once again, night falls. Yet all over the world, there are lights. For years now, the world has been in a perpetual state of light. For around a century, the world has been lit up, quietly burning, trying to outshine the sun. It has become the new normal for the Earth to be a beacon of artificial light in the universe. A conglomeration of electricity and metal filaments, hot glass, conduction through tungsten, electrons moving around atoms, a miniature universe of energy inside incandescent bulbs. What might one make of this blanket of light, seen from afar? This constant act not of nature, not of hot gas, but of will. The will to spread light, to maintain light. People speak of having seen the light, of being enlightened. Plato, of course, spoke of the cave, of people who, exposed to the daylight too quickly, after a lifetime of only firelight, shadows in the darkness, find themselves blinded, so overwhelmed with the light that they are left with an even greater darkness than they had without it. We have built this light around ourselves, and now, acting en masse, no one of us can turn them all out. What can be said of this celestial body that shines not of its own accord, not of instinctual, unthinking nature, but of this drive to live in the light? These myriad souls who seek to rebel against the darkness that pervades space. Far be it from me to even attempt a definitive answer. The thought does bring to mind a memory, however. Once a light bulb burned out in my room, and when, startled by the flash, I gazed up at it, I found that the now lifeless bulb cast a shadow. Among the light of the bulb still glowing, there, reaching across the ceiling, was a ray of darkness. Light, of course, is always traveling, faster than one can comprehend without a great deal of math. We can never catch up to it. Another thing that we cannot catch up to, of course, is time. Here now I have some parenting advice. I learned this lesson through my own parents who, though well-intentioned, placed a curse upon me. They didn't intend to be so, but it was a cruel thing to do. My advice is this: teach your children as much as you can, teach them many things, but never teach them to tell time. Teach them nothing about eons, millennia, centuries, decades, years, months, hours, minutes, or even seconds. Seconds, after all, are always past, always behind us. After all, when do we ever speak of experiencing bursts? When I was young, I hated school. Even in the second grade, I wrote that it was a hellhole. There was something fascist about it, I thought, or I would have thought that had I known such a term for it, about the way that it was carried out, the mandatory nature of it, the compulsion, grated against my very soul. Yet near the beginning, there was one saving grace. School, it seemed to me, was sort of an even trade, a relatively reasonable demand. For each year of school attended, there was a year of vacation, and vacation years were always filled with the best summer weather. As I got older, and was taught the length of years, I had a rude awakening. Summer was not a year, and the trade was uneven. As I realized this, the summer flew by in an instant, while school dragged on for an eternity. And my sadness when the warmth of summer began to wane became a depression that hits me at summer's end to this very day. I began, without intending it, to count the days, to be ever aware that my time was always limited. By the time I was 6 years old, the changing seasons, the beloved holidays, the birthdays, while retaining their superficial joy, had taken on a dark shadow underneath their surface. Each one marked one day, 1 month, 1 year closer to losing what I had. Each gift I was given haunted me, appearing to me as one more beautiful thing to lose. Time heals all wounds, they say. Yet isn't it true that it also inflicts most of them? For me, as time has passed, so have the worries, at least most of them, most of the time. I have in some respects returned to a state more in the moment than I've been for many years. I worry less about the future. I don't think much about the past. People often think that I'm playing a joke on them when they ask me how old I am, and I reply honestly that I can't remember. It is better, in my experience, to forget, and likely to never know in the first place. So that is my parenting advice. Never teach your children to tell time. Anytime. I suspect that had I never been told that summer was only 3 months long, perhaps the opposite effect would have happened. Perhaps summer would have become longer and longer until eventually summer became endless. Parenthood and childhood, both are fraught with so much unintentional cruelty. Teaching me to tell time is the most unintentionally cruel act my parents ever committed upon me. The second cruelest is one perhaps inherent to parenthood itself, and therefore totally unavoidable. They gave me the impression that, with age, the world begins to make sense. I'm sure that you remember that moment, that terrible moment when you realize so much of the world's order observed in childhood is actually a mess of random chance, coincidence, and the best guess decisions of those no more intelligent, moral, or prepared than you. The immaturity of the other children, you find, is less frequently left behind than you would have expected. It might be covered up by a facade of authority, self-confidence, or self-righteousness. Or perhaps it isn't concealed at all. You've seen it everywhere. There's the school bus driver caught texting while driving like a teenager. There's the CEO who ran a company into the ground because of his greed and ignorance. There's the politician who makes nothing but emotional claims, emotional arguments, and emotional promises, driven by his own fear and, of course, the fears of his voters. Then, of course, there are the two sets of parents who got into a fist fight over the use of an arcade game at the birthday party of their children. Now, the phrase, "we are all God's children," is intended to be comforting, but upon reflection, it might just as easily be a terrifying insight into ourselves. Let's not forget, of course, to look inward. Perhaps that's the worst of all. That realization you have, maybe in your late teens or early 20s, 30s, or 40s, maybe even later, when you suddenly come to grasp that you've reached the age you used to dream about, the age of adulthood, and you don't feel any more prepared for life than you did at age 10, and those you used to look up to now appear no more in control of anything than you are. It seems to me this insecurity about ourselves, about our development, has produced many of life's complexities. We fear being unable to provide for ourselves, and so we have economics. We feared being unable to protect ourselves, so we have government. We speak of anarchy as the worst of all possible states, a state in which the strongest gang rules everything. Yet couldn't we say that this is already the case? Strength, after all, is not merely physical. It's not merely based in violence, but it is psychological, and let's never forget, legal. The irony, of course, is that so many of our solutions, the answers to our fears and insecurities, simply create new ones. We feared being unable to have enough to eat, a place to live, and now we worry about whether or not we have enough money, whether we can keep a job, whether we can get a job. We worry about whether the stocks have risen or fallen, and we worry, of course, about our credit score. We feared being assaulted, taken advantage of, being stolen from. And now we fear breaking the law, we fear the police having too much power over us. We fear getting sued for some innocuous offense, and we fear filing our taxes incorrectly and getting audited. Now, I'm oversimplifying the matter, I admit that. Certainly there are other factors at work. Greed, for example. Yet even greed seems to thrive on fear. We want what we don't have. We fear, if only indirectly, the thought of not having something, of missing out. We stockpile more things than we have time to use or to enjoy. We advance in technology and believe that we can't live without things that just decades earlier didn't even exist. We view the distant past as a dark and wretched prison. We don't know how our ancestors made it as far as they did. Consider electricity, for instance. Just a little over a century ago, the world was filled with humble candles and fireplaces and simple gas lights. Now, the lights go on and off with the flick of a switch, and the light of the world is always switched on. The once dark planet now glows unceasingly, as countless houses and skyscrapers the world over are lit up. There is never a point in which so many lights are off that the planet ceases its shine. The dark universe watches as the Earth becomes bright, as so many other celestial bodies have. Artificial or not, the universe waits, bored, as it has countless times before, waiting for the bright orb to cease shining and return to the seemingly infinite darkness. These days, we can't imagine life without electricity, without the ability to say, "Let there be light," and to have it be so whenever we wish. Yet this access to light is so very recent. For ages, the most reliable light was simply that of the sun, and darkness was simply part of the reality of night. Fire was the only weapon against it. Now, once again, night falls. Yet all over the world, there are lights. There are lights.